Wherapy. Therapy wherever, whenever.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast Coffee with a Therapist. My name is Andersson. I am a psychotherapist and the founder of Wherapy. Here it's a bit past 5 a.m. in the morning. The sun is hidden behind some clouds, and I've just pressed the coffee machine on, so it's working at full force, and I'm waiting for my coffee. Usually I go out and sit in a car. I drive out to some beautiful place, and I take a few pictures and like. But today I'm feeling really tired, so I'm gonna skip that. The theme of today's podcast is womanhood, and in particular early womanhood, and depression that can be specific to that, or the causes of depression for girls going into adulthood and young women. So if you're interested, stay tuned. So now that I've sat myself down with my hot cup of coffee, I'm ready to begin. But before I do so, let me just tell you that the following is based on my experiences as a children's therapist, and also my experience from my work as a therapist on Wherapy. It is not based on any assumptions. Yeah, it's my observations during my time in these two professions. Yeah. Let me just take one sip of coffee. Okay, I'm looking at my notes for the session, and if you want to see them, go over to Facebook, Wherapy's Facebook or Wherapy's Instagram, and you'll see a picture of the notes and some pictures maybe of my bed hair and the area where I'm filming, or I'm recording rather, this podcast, which is my office. So womanhood and depression. There's a lot of evidence, or I've read a few articles where it says that women, and particularly young women, are more likely to self-harm. They're also more likely to suffer from a depression, and that statistic is a little bit unclear because we don't know how many boys who are suffering from depression but experience that there's a stigma around it and don't want to talk about it. Yeah. So women are a lot more open, and also girls are a lot more open about their mental health issues, but the statistics clearly show that they are more with those who are open about their depression, boys and girls, and with those who are struggling with their mental health issues, girls are more likely to self-harm. Yeah. I think there are a load of issues which may be specific to women, that make them more, or not more, but can cause them to have a depression. Yeah, and I've been thinking about this based on my clinical work, and I'm not saying that these reasons make it more likely yeah, it's just that these reasons are a little bit different to the reasons men and boys have for being depressed. Yeah, these are reasons that are unique to women, and I'm not thinking about the hormonal aspect, where women are maybe um, more prone to mood swings over a short-term basis. Yeah, because a depression is a little bit longer than that. Yeah, and my first the first area that I want to talk about is the experience of maybe not having full ownership and control over your body. Yeah. So when you're a young girl and you start to develop physically and you also have your period, yeah, you feel there are many who feel like they are maybe losing ownership of their bodies. Yeah, and it's a lot different. What I can imagine anyway, yeah, to how boys feel, because boys don't have that experience of something being outside of their control. Yeah, a period can comes at the beginning, not so routine, maybe not, and more so later in life, but it is something that an aspect of the body, a bodily function, if you will, that kind of doesn't take that you don't have control over. Yeah. In psychology, we talk a lot about the anal phase of when being a child, where we have to learn how to control our bowels, and if we can't control them, then we feel a sense of shame, and that might end up being some sort of personality trait that we develop and carry with us into adulthood. Yeah. And with a period, we cannot control it. Yeah. So right there we have a difference between my body and I as a woman. Yeah. Or as a young girl, I must kind of work to compensate the this thing I can't control about my body. Yeah. And if you listen to maybe a lot of women talk about their bodies, they talk about their bodies as if it's another entity. Yeah. A lot of the time, and boys don't talk about their bodies in that way. You don't get the impression that it's something else. Women often say, well, I have the right to do what I want with my body, for example. Whereas boys and guys, even and men, even if the same applies to them, they don't really say it that way. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between the young woman and their body. Yeah. The mental young woman and their body. Yeah. And when somebody feels depressed, a young girl feels depressed because of this, there are a lot of women who develop depression around the age of maybe 14, and a lot of them self-harm. And I just thought about how self-harm is a way for them to regain control. Yeah. Obviously, it's a way for them to punish themselves. It's a way for them to get out the anxiety that they feel. A lot of self-harm is about relieving themselves of anxiety rather than a wish to die. Yeah. But it's also a way for them to kind of punish their body and also to control their body, control the bleeding, rather than just randomly bleeding like they do when they have a period. So this lack of control that the bodily development kind of brings forth, that notion of a lack of control is something that can kickstart them thinking about other things and can start them to think about a conflict in their life. This coffee was good today, but the women, they're more at that age, tweens, teenage years, with the development of their body, they're kind of forced into an inner conflict. Boys, they can choose to be children, for as long as they want, basically, where they have a lot slower, they're children for longer, they're move into maybe being a adult, can go at a much slower pace if they want to, whereas a woman, once she has started to develop and she is producing eggs and she is having her period, she's also reminded of the fact that she is one physical purpose of the womanly body is to reproduce, and that is something that comes hopefully for girls not when they're 12, 13 or 14, a lot later, when they're adults, when they're ready for it. But in the meantime, they're kind of jumping between being a kid, staying a kid, and then all of a sudden having a period, and that being associated with reproduction, so they're kind of jolted into adulthood at a very young age, and they jump back and forth. They want to kind of stay kids, but this reminds them of it, and other aspects, which I will get into soon, will remind them that, well, you're an adult, basically, or society is treating you in a certain way, so that kind of innocence that they have as children is being taken away from them, and they feel animosity about that. And this is something, again, which is outside of their control. It's a physical aspect, And that kind of moves me on to my second point, then. The way society treats women, and especially young girls, or the way society treats women in general, forces women to grow up quicker, if we get back to that, or we go back to that point of a young girl, maybe tweens, or maybe early teens, 13, 14, wanting to be that kid, that child, just have some, just having some fun, being silly with their friends, wanting to remain a child, and then we see, then they might experience some guy, much older man, looking at them in a certain way or talking to them in a certain way, which kind of either shames them, they're talking about them physically or approaching them maybe sexually or something, which hopefully, or which no man shouldn't approaching them and talking about their bodies. This forces them into adulthood very quickly, and that is something that is more likely to happen to girls. There is I've heard some girls talk about that they kind of were dancing with their friends when they were maybe 12, 13, on a kind of ferry to another country, or and there was a lot of drunk adults there, and some drunk older guy talked to them in a certain way and wanted to approach them sexually, and that is just that experience in itself. They're playing with their friends, they're trying to maybe stay a little bit in that version of themselves as a kid, and then the society isn't allowing them to do that. And this creates a sense of animosity again. An animosity towards older men for kind of sexualizing them at a young age, and then an animosity towards boys of their age for being able to remain young and innocent. So I think there's a lot in that which can lead to depression later in life, with women as well, when they reflect on it. Because having to be dragged into that adult world at a young age, an age which you're not kind of ready for it, can cause you a lot of inner conflict. On the one hand, you want to be, a lot of people are kind of rearing to become an adult at that age, but on the other hand, they're not ready for it. They feel kind of a sense of anxiety towards being separated from a younger version of themselves, a much more innocent version of themselves. And these young girls, young women, they're more prone to seeing the dark side of society. And this is not a kind of black and white exclusionary thing where I'm saying no boy can see the dark side of society, but girls in general, they have to grow up a little bit quicker. They have to accept the negative aspects of society, and they see it in a more real way, whereas young boys, they can remain boys, they can remain innocent if they choose to, and they can kind of shut their eyes from and not see that kind of older people sexualizing them or the like. Then we have the experience that some women kind of experience of being able to kind of also use your physicality to get what you want. And especially young women, if they feel like they have done this gives them a great sense of shame afterwards. And now I'm talking about women older, obviously, than 13, 14, yeah. But if you kind of, as a woman, at some point feel or experience that your physicality has an effect on the opposite sex, and that you can have some sort of power over them, and get them to do certain things that you want, then you're also reminded that they're doing this because I am going along with society's view of me as a sexual object, yeah. And that also afterwards, yeah, creates a sense of shame, which can also lead into a depression, yeah. Mm. And then there's kind of women who have been maybe victims of some sort of sexual abuse at a young age, for example. I had one patient who cleaned themselves a lot, yeah. That's what they often do. They clean themselves a lot, and they say, "Oh, I feel so dirty." And this is a kind of, this can be connected to that split between the mental person and the physical body. My body was molested. I don't want to be in my body. I'm going to clean it until I feel like I'm out of my body some way, and they never end up achieving that. So they keep on cleaning themselves, and they develop this sort of compulsiveness in order to kind of soothe their feelings, yeah, to soothe their anxiety, to heal themselves, and that spills into other aspects of their lives, yeah. The sense of shock which is associated with being molested, with somebody seeing them as a sexual object at a young age, yeah, is obviously something that has kind of maybe shocked them and thought and led them to see that I can never be this young innocent girl again, yeah, and this perpetrator has caused me to become an adult straight away, yeah. And damn these other people for being able to remain young and innocent, yeah. And likewise with what I was saying a while ago, when the woman uses their body in order to, when they see that their body can influence other people, and they go along with it, yeah, then they also feel like they can, they also feel a sense of shame, as I mentioned, afterwards usually, and this can lead to similar reactions of wanting to maybe clean the body and being maybe a little bit compulsive, just to kind of to distance themselves from what they have done, yeah. And that inner conflict between the physical body and the mental state, it isn't there in the same way for boys, and that's partly because society has for years and years and years sexualized the female body, whereas it hasn't laid the same emphasis on the manly body being something that can be sexualized. And finally, there's the notion of younger women, women of all ages, but relatively young women, seeing older women being treated badly by society, being undervalued, and that perception of women having an expiry date. A lot of women, when they get into adulthood, they're happy about their youth and the looks that they have, and they put a lot of value into that because society has told them to put a lot of value into that. And then they see that older women are maybe not looked at in the same way, or older women are also not valued in the same way academically or for their mental prowess, but that is also the case for men, but and that they're discarded by certain parts of society for that. They're not appreciated in the same way, so women can feel like they have an expiry date. That notion of having an expiry date whilst also having the rest of their lives to live. Now, thankfully, a lot of Western society is going in a new direction, but before a lot of men talked about women as being done when they're 30 physically, and if they don't, if they're not married by then nobody wants them. And this kind of thought process is so stupid, but it's been something that has been so ingrained in society that women have also thought about it a lot, which has caused them to feel a lot of stress about some expiry date in the near future, not being useful to other people, and therefore gaining stress. There's also the biological constraints of being somebody who can reproduce. Fertility rates decline as you get older, so there's a stress of having to get babies young, and a lot of women might not want to do that. They might want to just not have kids. They might also want to focus on something else, but they're forced into that choice at a very young age, whereas men are not forced into that choice. So there's an inner conflict. Should I do what I should do as a woman, or should I see to my needs as a person, my personal development? And that is not to say that children cannot be a part of that, but a lot of women are faced with that thought process at a very young age, and that puts a lot of stress. And then we come to the inner conflict there, where they maybe want a child quickly, but they can't get a child. They want a child, but the situation doesn't allow them to have a child, or they have gotten a child and they weren't ready for it, and they have a lot of other things that are motivating them, which maybe they're not able to pursue because they have a child, which they have to wait for. So there was my analysis of how different ways in which women can develop depression, and these ways are unique to women. And I've talked a lot about young women, all the way from maybe tweens, young teens to maybe 30, that area. I'll look into maybe ways older women can, middle-aged and older women can develop depression in a future podcast. So if you're interested in the podcast and you liked what I talked about, then please just subscribe to us on whatever platform you are listening to this to, and also make sure to follow our social media, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I Twitter a little bit, not so much, to get updates on the podcast and to see a lot of other material as well, informative posts about depression and what you can do and the like. And of course, if you're so inclined, you want a therapy session, just go to wherapy.com and book a session with me there. And in the meantime, have a great day and take care of yourself.